Good morning, everybody. Stu Smith here going live, and it is Monday, and we're combining a little something today. I usually do a weekend podcast called the Never Quit Mindset Podcast, focusing on many of the things we write about in here. However, due to life and family commitments, the house was full, and we could not do one in the on the weekends. So we bumped it over to Monday, and we're going to combine the live Q&A session with this quick little podcast introduction while you guys congregate. And after this little introduction, I'll take some questions, give some answers, and we'll go from there. But what I wanted to chat about today was in this program right here, Never Quit Mindset. I focus on just all the topics of what happens to us physically, mentally, emotionally, and whether it is a motivation issue, an effort issue, a discipline issue, what makes someone quit or not quit. And writing that down has been a 20-year process. It has taken me that long to really come to terms with how I teach it as a coach, whether that is through physical training or just verbally with students. A lot of it is done by what I call the scoop method, one scoop a day. Uh, Makes you mentally tougher, but you got to do it every day consistently versus some gigantic kick in the nuts that will physically harm you potentially. You might get a little mentally tougher out of it, but if you're injured and you can't train because of it, is it really that helpful? So anyway, there's a lot of discussions on what you need to create the never quit mindset. I have a theory on how that works. Been using it as a coach for over 25 years. I think my system works. There are other systems that work just as well. But something I do in this program is I try to find a quote that encapsulates each chapter. And as I was writing this book, I noticed that the Stoics really had it nailed down. I probably quote Marcus Aurelius most of the time. I quote a few others as well in here, but just the one quote about getting outside your comfort zone. You don't get mentally tough inside a comfort zone. You got to get outside of that comfort zone. And this doesn't have anything to do with spec ops preparing. It has to do with everything. You can't learn unless you're outside your comfort zone. That you're going to be stupid or weak or not good at something that you're trying to improve on, and that is not comfortable. To grow, you got to be outside that comfort zone. And an example of that chapter we discuss and have a little advice to challenge yourself and at the end of each chapter. But at the end of each chapter, I have a quote. And this quote here by Marcus Aurelius is, "Comfort is the worst addiction." That's how I sum up that get outside your comfort zone. So where I got a lot of these quotes, I realized after doing some deep dives into Stoicism, is a lot of the studies that Marcus Aurelius had, who I quoted often in there, come from Epictetus, who was about 50 years before his, maybe about 100 years before Marcus Aurelius' time, but his studies or his writings of things that he taught were instrumental in many people in Stoic society or mindset philosophy. And what made him interesting is that he was a slave. He was born into slavery. He was a slave for about 40 years. And then after that, he became a philosopher of Stoicism. And something that he learned inside slavery was that they can beat my body. They can tell me what to do every day, and I have no personal time, but they can't take my mind. So he kind of went with that for good formative years of his life, and then created the school around that general philosophy. And something that I like of what he teaches is about true freedom is internal. And it comes from controlling one's own will and judgment, not from external factors like power and wealth. Um, he said, even a friend of Caesar's is a slave if their happiness depends on the ruler's favor. So even though he's a slave, he's seeing all these people that are slaves because of uh, their will and judgment are controlled by the external factors. One of my favorite quotes by his is, "You have two ears and one mouth so that you can listen twice as much as you speak. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to what happens." So anyway, Epictetus' life and how we put this into a never quit mindset is obviously you're a slave. You're born into slavery. You've been a slave. And the one thing that his slave master would allow is for him to study Stoicism. And he did. And then eventually this slave master freed him. And around 38, 40 years old, he goes back to Greece and creates a school on Stoicism. And he never wrote anything down, but all his students did. And that's where we get a lot of his writings from. So that's that's just one of those things that I think, he was just so mentally strong that it didn't matter that he was a slave. He was still learning and growing and had foresight to be able to say, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to quit focusing on that, in my future. Um, so here's something that I think you can take away from Epictetus's writings. He had two categories, pretty much of everything: what is up to us and what is not up to us. So up to us is our opinions, our choices, our desires, our thoughts, our actions. And what is not up to us are other people's actions, external events, weather, others' opinions. And he had a simple question of when something occurred to him, he would notice, okay, this is affecting me, but is it in my control? And if it wasn't in his control, he let it go. And it helps you reduce um, anxiety, frustration, depression. I've been trying this one as well because, you're driving down the street and someone pulls out in front of you. And I got this big truck. I know they saw me, right? And obviously, their actions affect me. And, being able to just take a big deep breath, smile, and just say, it's not gonna you're not going to break me, right? One of my favorite things that I remember in the teams is there was this one guy, Keith, and he was so funny, and he would just, he'd pick on everybody, and everybody pick on him, and then when they would find something that irritated him, you could see it irritated him, but then he was only just say, "You can't snap me, can't snap me, can't snap me." And he'd say that over and over again till you're just like, "Oh, Jesus, they're just gonna give up." And then we'd all laugh. Then we all started using that term. You can't snap me. I guess that would be the young man's version of Epictetus's saying. is this in my control? Just by saying you can't snap me. I always found that one to be a good one. Do you get road rage? You lose your discipline? Instead of doing that, take a big deep breath and say, can't snap me, right? That car can't drive. Give him the thumbs down maybe on his driving versus the thumbs up. that may de-escalate any future situations in there. So here's some quick takeaways, and then I'll take some questions. So actionable takeaways from Epictetus's question to daily life. So when facing a challenge, pause and ask, is this in my control? Can I fix this through my actions, my attitudes, and my choices? That's how you do it. So let frustration go about things you can't change. Practice gratitude for the ability to choose your response. An attitude of gratitude goes a long way. Use setbacks as opportunities to strengthen your character. Once again, you can't grow unless you're outside that comfort zone. So be willing to get outside that comfort zone and keep on moving. Never quit. That's what the never quit mindset's all about. You guys check this out. It's less than 100 pages, easy read, and I have found it as a resourceful reference guide. Like I have gone back, even though I wrote it, I go back to it and think, what did I say about getting outside my comfort zone? What challenges can I do to get outside my comfort zone? Here's one. Time to push outside your comfort zone. Here's what you do. If you're waiting for a sign, this is it. At some point, you must start moving and trusting in yourself. Don't be scared to start over. You may like your new story better. Do one uncomfortable thing every day. Cold showers, early morning workouts, fast. All of these things are just little ways that you can challenge your daily life and work on your attitude, your ability to not get frustrated. Have some gratitude and strengthen your character while you're at it. So that is my quick, where are we? 15 minutes worth of chatting, 13 minutes worth of chatting about Epictetus. So check out his readings or writings, teachings. I guess he didn't write, but his students wrote for him. But yeah, you can't go wrong with that. Or read Marcus Aurelius, because he was a good consumer of that level of Stoicism, that type of Stoicism. All right. Looks like. Have you checked Ernst Younger out? I have. I appreciate the tip. Good stuff. In fact, I may have to bring him on next week. We'll talk about Ernst. And when I say I bring him on, it's just a joke. When you have a podcast, you bring on guests. Obviously, my guests are been dead for 1,000 years or more. But talking about them, memorializing them in a way that we still use their teachings, I think is a good thing to do. It's funny how, though times have changed and we have all this fancy stuff, like I'm talking to you in my basement on a computer like it's a TV screen. You have a phone that's probably listening to it. But, some of the same problems that we have today, those Stoics dealt with as well. And, you guys have a favorite quote from the Stoics? If you do, share it. Love to read it. Zeno says, one of my favorite Stoicism quotes, true good fortune is what you make for yourself. Good fortune, good character, Good intentions, good actions. I like that. I also like discipline as freedom too. Now I know, Jocko uses that for his, many of his merch, but it is based in Stoicism, 100%. And by having a little bit of discipline, mentally, physically, emotionally, you can definitely, in your actions, in your gratitude, it is freedom, just like Epictetus says. All right, let's see. Retro Nighthawk says, I have your new book coming today. Sweet. Appreciate it. Let me know what you think. So, if you guys haven't gone over to StuSmithFitness.com, there's all kinds of programs over there, from books and ebooks like these, to crush any fitness test. We are in our seasonal tactical fitness periodization mode. We're in the fall transition. And this transition of training is what it's called. We kind of transition in the spring and the fall. So we do the summer peak hardcore calisthenics and cardio workout. Everybody's nearly burned out from running a lot, swimming a lot, lots of high rep calisthenics, little bit of deload cycles going in there to maintain some lifts, but most of it is pure muscle stamina and endurance. Now, the fall allows us to um, change into a lift cycle in the winter. And the way we do that is we start adding lifts, but it's progressive. Just like you're starting on a running program and you haven't run much, you got to do it progressively. We're doing the same thing with lifting. A lot of folks are new to lifting, or we haven't lifted in a cycle since spring, even. So we are progressing back into lifting. And the way we do that is we transition our calisthenics into weight vest versions of calisthenics. So you'll see a lot more weight vests, pull-ups, dips, push-ups, squats, lunges, with weight, but we're reducing the repetitions with that. And then we add some weights. We still warm up with some calisthenics and we cool down with cardio, but it's not the major focus of the workout. And during this phase, early fall, we're still running a lot. Like today, we did a track workout that probably accumulated at least 5 or 6 miles. Yeah. And, we did a lot of calisthenics in there. There's a supplemental weight training today for legs, as well as a swim with fins later on. So we're working still a high volume, but we're used to it. But we're slowly reducing that volume, kind of like the back end of a bell curve. We're slowly reducing that volume to become shorter and faster runs, and heavier weights. And that will be our winter lift cycle. And then we'll finish the winter lift cycle, come up in the spring, and start ramping it up again. And the reason why we do this is a lot of people neglect their weaknesses, or they try to improve a weakness while they're working hard on their strengths. And sometimes they don't mesh together well. And what I mean by that is if you're running a high mileage cardio, swimming a lot as well, and rucking, the chances of you putting on mass and getting stronger at the same time with heavier weights is reduced significantly. In fact, you may not even do well in the cardio because of your heavier lifting, or vice versa. So we just break it up into cycles, and it has made all the difference in the world. And I wouldn't say this just because, hey, this is the way I do it. I've been doing this for 26 years, and it is life changing, because I was about broken at 30 because I'd been redlining everything as much as I could, to a point where, overtraining really started to show its symptoms. Um, Always injured, always sick. Um, so yeah, I figured out this system, and it's just a way for a tactical athlete, someone who wants to get good at everything, to have sort of a fitness budget throughout the year that works with their strengths and weaknesses, so they never are neglecting any of them. They're not neglecting their strengths because they're great at lifting. You can still be really good at lifting. You just can't ignore your cardio and your endurance and muscle stamina. So that's why the system is set up the way it is. If you're really wondering what seasonal tactical fitness periodization is, all you got to do is put it in the Google machine, and it will show you many articles and programs. And in fact, I'll put it in the comment section over here. Those of you who are new and haven't heard me talk about it, it is pretty much what we do. And even our spec ops candidates here that are preparing for their futures are doing that system. We just pump it up to a level that is specific to their future selections, whether it's Ranger training, SF training, Navy SEAL, PJs. In fact, we had one of our PJs come back to visit today, and that was really cool. Finished all his school and heading to his first command. That's always nice when they come back to visit. Let's see. What questions do we have? Philosophical works, like Nietzsche. Solid for sure. This though it's more psychology, but still. Got 100-ish today. Oh, 100-ish days till I ship out with the Ranger contract. Training is already going well. What should I really crack down on the next stretch before I leave? Good question. The neat thing about Army training that you're going to go through is that it's at least somewhat physically challenging. Like your boot camp basic training will be physically oriented. Whereas I have to say, the Navy and the Air Force is a little bit easy, right? It's technically oriented, and it's just not physically demanding. So a lot of the guys who are going to go special ops after Navy boot camp or basic military training in the Air Force have to go through a little prep course to kind of get back into shape, because it just wasn't enough for them to maintain their abilities. So what I usually do with the Army and the Air Force guys is just say, don't even taper. Don't even bother. Just go in redlined and let basic training be your taper. And that works for most people. And they have to add workouts at the end of the day, things like that. Now, for the Army and Marine Corps guys, it's going to be challenging. So it's not something that you want to be burned out and tired going into. You want to be, not necessarily well rested, well tested, but you don't want to be burned out either. So my advice is work on your weaknesses, maintain your strengths, and just make sure you don't have any weaknesses. Make sure you're getting plenty of mileage in. And, while you're going through the advanced training that follows boot camp, this is the beauty of Army and Marine Corps, is that, they go on to infantry school afterwards. They may go to jump school afterwards and then go into Ranger training, or, the order. Yeah. And then, go through the selection process for that. So you have some stepping stones to kind of get yourself in Army Ranger shape. Now you may have to add some supplemental stuff in there, at the end of the day, just to get better at rucking and load bearing and things like that, because that will be the challenge for you for sure. So that's where I would work on that. may not be a bad idea to do some long rucks fasted. You will be, when you go to ranger school, you will have limited food. Um, so that is something that, you know, just have to get used to. But you will burn a lot of fuel, and fat. So you want to eat afterwards. You don't want to just lose a lot of weight going in. You want to have a little bit of chunk, I think, going into that one, because you will lose a lot of mass when you go through that type of training. At least that's ranger school. It may not be ranger selection, which are two different events. What's the general recommendation for weight going into PJ selection at 5'9"? Good question. I don't really think it matters. I mean, spec ops guys come in all shapes and sizes. I will say, once again, the whole bell curve of science seems to fall into the height weight standards of you have shorter guys that are lighter than 150. You have most people in this bulk of the bell curve that are 5'9" to 6 feet, 185 to 200. And then you have a smaller side of bigger guys that are over 200. So I would say, whatever's comfortable for you. If you feel like you don't have a lot of muscle mass, maybe you need some muscle mass and you might need to put on 10 pounds. If you have plenty of muscle mass, maybe too much muscle mass, you might want to lose 10 pounds. So there's no real good answer. I would say the average usually for 5'9" might be, 180, 185. That means you got some muscle mass on you for your height, but you're not skinny at 5'9". I've seen 5'9" at 140, and I would say you need to put on some weight. I've seen 5'9" at 210. You need to lose some weight. Hey, I have a bad shoulder from swimming. Can I swim twice a week while I recover so I don't lose all the swimming progress? My 500's in the 730s. Yeah, if your 500's already that fast, I wouldn't sweat it. My advice is this: if you're going to swim, just swim with fins and don't even use your bottom shoulder. Make your, you could just do like lead arm, trail arm, swimming with fins if you want. Get the leg workout of finning in there and not even use your arms. But if you wanted to use your arms, I would say get on your side, do the combat swimmer stroke, and that bottom arm is just hanging out there, not doing anything. Top arm can be a full pull. But yeah, that's what I do. My advice is this: if you're already swimming 730s, I wouldn't sweat any more 500-yard swims. You're going to be fine. Even if you slow down to 830, you're still killing it for most people. But I will say this: you need to swim with fins, because that's going to be the next journey for you, is swimming a mile, 2 miles with fins, and making sure your ankles and feet can handle those big rocket fins. All right. Looks like I've answered all these questions over here. You guys got any more? Oh, here's Craig. Had a quote from Seneca, who I also quote in this book. Much toil remains to confront it. You must yourself lavish all your waking hours and all your efforts if you wish the result to be accomplished. Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah, if you got stuff to do, get it done. There's a big debate now on, in fact, there's some science that is proving this to be true. A lot of us say, I just don't have the motivation to go do anything, go work out, whatever. And there's some science now that is coming out that is saying that it's not motivation that you need for effort and going to do stuff. You actually need the effort to build motivation, and that creates momentum. And now you're motivated to do stuff after you've started moving, which I find to be really fascinating because it's basically this explained with another layer of science, because I use kind of like the hero's journey of fitness goals or any goal for that matter. And it starts off with, you're kind of up here, right? And you get this idea. It really is like, okay, I like this idea. I'm going to go do this. So you go do it. You start doing it, and everything's going great. And then all of a sudden, bam, things don't go so great. You don't feel like you're so motivated anymore to do this. And you get down in this little hole and you notice that you suck at everything that you're doing and you're not seeing any improvement. That is this little down part of the bottom, right? And then all of a sudden you keep moving though. You keep moving though, and then it starts coming up and you see those results starting to happen. And you're out of the hole now and you start seeing progress and you make new goals and you keep going until it just like goes off the chart of you moving in that direction. And so I kind of call that the hero's journey of making a fitness goal. Is we all have these doubts that we have to deal with. We all have starting issues. And one thing that I realized after writing this never quit mindset is that, yeah, it's great to have a never quit mindset, but guess what? If you don't have a starting mindset, what's the point of having a never quit mindset? Right? You got to start. And that's probably the hardest thing of all of this, is just getting people started towards a goal that is hard, that's going to push them out of their comfort zone and make them actually grow. So that's where my coaching has kind of evolved into the last 26 years of doing this. I'm just finally, I think, able to verbalize how that whole process works. And I think it's made me a better coach. So if you're into coaching, you might pick up something as well in the never quit mindset. But if you're a student, you definitely will, because it is written for you, the student, for sure. So check it out. It's not even $20. Let's see. Zeno says, life is dyed by the color of your thoughts. You still a coach? Yes, I am still a coach. In fact, I coached this morning, a whole bunch of people. In fact, you go to my Instagram, you see pictures of people I coach every day, whether it's swimming or it's outdoor running and calisthenics and weight training. One thing that we do to add a little bit of grit to our workouts is everything we do is outdoors, except for mobility day. We go inside on mobility day and we stretch and we foam roll, and just a nice way to add a recovery day in the middle of the week, work on some mobility and flexibility, which a lot of guys need, not only for just running issues, but for swimming, streamlining. We still have guys that swim like this, like when they put their hands over their head, right? Their arms straight over their head, they can't be straight. They're out there like this, and they wonder why they keep swimming into the lane line every 3 strokes, right? That just adds distance to your swims. You do it in open water, you won't be long before you turn a circle. If you close your eyes and swim in the open water, chances are you're going to do a 360 in about 5 minutes. Just happens. So posture, mobility, flexibility, all of those are required to swim straight, swim efficiently, run efficiently, tread water, have good hip, knee, and ankle movement. So yeah, we do a lot of teaching that's indoors, and then we go outdoors, fall, winter, summer, spring. Hot and humid in the summers where you're after a workout, your shoes are squishy, or you go out in the winter and you don't even want to step out of your car because it's 20 degrees and you know you're going to be outside for the next hour and a half. That sucks. But you get a little bit tougher, one scoop at a time every time you do it. Somebody just asked, what do I think about the Turkish SAT commandos? You know, I've never worked with them. I don't know enough about them. Sorry. How do I select recruits, and how much how does mentality matter in the selection process? Okay, good question. Well, here's the problem. I don't select recruits. My rules for coaching is you have to be preparing to serve. And this is for my local coaching. I'll coach anybody online. I don't care if you're 50 years old and still doing triathlons, or you're 30 years old and 80 pounds overweight and want to get in shape, or you're a young guy getting prepared to serve. I'll coach anybody online. Um, Most of them tend to be a little bit older on the online side, but my local folks are young folks that are preparing to serve. Now, we have some veterans that come in, we have some active duty guys that come in. A lot of times, the active duty guys are preparing for a spec ops selection, so they're regular military or law enforcement, police officers preparing for a SWAT team, because these are fairly advanced workouts. So we're preparing them for the grind that is usually part of a selection process. So that's how we select recruits. You have to be wanting to do that or doing it. If you just want to run triathlons, we're not your group. Let's see. So what's the other question? Mentality matter? Yeah, mentality matters tremendously in spec ops selection. You know, it's kind of mind over matter. You don't mind, it doesn't matter, as the cliche goes. And you just got to, how bad do you want it? Is really the true answer that I try to help people find. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, people have found that, you know what? I think I'm just going to go back to college, right? Finish up college and then make a decision what I want to do, right? Or they, we've had some guys that, think they want to serve, and they say, you know what? I think I'm going to join a band and be a band member. We actually had a guy do that, or go back to work, or, whatever. Some guys unfortunately want to serve, and then they go through the medical process and they find out that they're medically disqualified for something. And that's a little heartbreaking, but we try to find other options for them. Might be a different service that allows them to come in depending on the medical ailment. Might be law enforcement. Federal law enforcement may allow it to come in. So we try to help them figure out how they can best serve if they want to serve. That is the number one, I guess, stipulation to join my workouts here locally. And they're free. They're free workouts for anybody who wants to serve. So that's how I give back. Gives me ideas to write about. I figure if I'm going to be a coach and write about coaching, I should be coaching all the time. And I do 6 days a week, 2 times a day. It's good times. It is a passion, and I love it. So, good morning. What is a good weight range for 6'1" man for optimal PST scores? Good question. I mean, that was my height, 6 feet, 6'1" with combat boots on. I was like 195. Probably my best PST scores were when I was at that 195 range. I went into buds though at like 205 just to have a little extra bulk for the cold weather of first phase and the grind. Little did I realize that my second phase would be much colder than my first phase. Winter dive phase was brutal. I was much colder. in dive phase. So I just kept on the weight. And then third phase ripped it up a little bit and got back down to 195. So for me, I was pretty optimal 190, 195 range. I've seen people at that height still do well at like 185, 205. So I would say that'd be the range, 185 to 205. Any more than that, you get a little slow. And it's hard to do obstacle courses when you're hanging on with your grippers and you're a heavier guy. With my bad shoulder, how should I hit the gym? That's a good question. I mean, leg days and core or cardio are all on the table still. You just have to be careful with your shoulder. I mean, I have a guy right now that I'm coaching, older guy, a little bit older than me. He still likes to get after it, and I wrote a workout with him, and we figured out what he couldn't do with his shoulder. So I said, go in the gym, let's figure this out. And it was all pushing exercises. So he couldn't dip, couldn't go overhead, couldn't bench, couldn't push up, but he could row and he could do pull ups still. So it wasn't a true shoulder injury, might have been like a tricep injury up high in the shoulder. Um, but it feels like a shoulder injury. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I just realized what he can't do. So we just ignored all of that stuff and we just did pull. So depending on what you can do with your shoulder, you might still be able to get away with some bicep curls, some tricep push downs for the arms. You might not be able to do overheads or pull ups, but it's up, kind of go in the gym and figure that out. Do everything else though, your leg days, your core, your cardio, and just pick and choose what upper body stuff you can do to isolate that shoulder. So there you go. Let's see. Joseph says, I'm 6'1", and when I was between 181 and 201, I performed at my best. Retired at 23, Army Infantry. Yeah, that's solid weight. Solid weight for sure. I have found personally, I perform my best under 200 pounds. And that's why my goal for the rest of my life is to be under 200 pounds. And right now I'm about 212. So I'm trying to lose 12 more pounds. What's the best thing about what you do? Great question. I get to see first thing in the morning a generation of people who want to do something greater, bigger than themselves. They want to serve our country. They want to serve our communities. We got firefighters, we got police officers, FBI agents, Secret Service, every branch of service in the military represented. We have young high school kids that are joining service academies or enlisting right afterwards. And that's what I get to see every day. And I will never be one of those older generation guys. I'm 56 right now, and usually people my age and even younger will look at teenagers and say, "Oh, they're soft. All they do is play video games. Nobody lives tough anymore." That's not what I see. I see young men and women who are willing to do very hard things and go do great things. And in fact, we had couple of pilots, a couple guys became pilots this weekend or end of last week. Guys getting through Hell Week the week before. Like I said, one of our guys just graduated PJ training, came back to visit today. And it's incredible to be a part of their journey. And I do that at no cost to them. That's everybody wins. I win because I get to see that. They win because they get free workouts. And I get ideas to be a better coach because I am constantly coaching people that have issues with something. A lot of these guys are great land athletes, but none of them can swim well. So I got to get them to swim well. And that's not like competitive swimming level swimming. It's just getting through a military swim course, and swimming competently, not competition level. But yeah, that is the best thing I do at work. The best thing I do at home is be a dad and a husband. Be as best one of those as I can be. So, work wise, you heard it. Home wise, and son, because my dad lives with me and he's not doing well. So, I take care of him too. So, we all have our choices in life. I like my choices. I would do it all over again. If I could relive my life, I would do the same thing. Not many people could say that. And maybe I would have invested in Apple earlier. That's for sure. But yeah, there we go. All right, folks. I think I am good. If you guys got any more questions, send it now because I do have to shut this down. If you guys haven't, if I missed your question, I apologize. You can still email me, stu@stusmith.com. Please do. If you're looking for CSS critiques, I got a ton of them over at my TikTok page, StuSmith50. I'm trying to put them on my YouTube shorts and my Instagram reels as well. So there's a lot of them over there. If you want to check out the check out those as far as learning the combat swimmer stroke and treading and swimming with fins and things like that. I guess that's it, huh? Any more questions? Thanks, Zeno. Appreciate it. Quad tendonitis. Yeah, that's a tough one. Because do you feel it in your patella, right? Or do you feel it up higher in your hip? Because remember, you got two connections when you have a quadricep muscle. You got the lower end and the higher end. One goes into your hip, one goes into the knee. Most quad tendonitis shows itself as a patella tendonitis. So it really kind of depends. If you do a little research on which one that is in the hip or in the knee, you'll find physical therapists on YouTube that can walk you through it. Yeah, above the kneecap is pretty common. There is a science-backed remedy that has worked really well, especially towards the end of your injury and you're trying to build it back up. And it's simply probably what most people think are the most useless exercises in the gym for legs. Everybody likes to squat and deadlift and do leg press machines, but when you sit on a chair and you do leg extensions like this, great for knee tendonitis. In fact, there's a study I think came out of Australia where they do like a 10-second rep. So 5 seconds up, super slow rep, 5 seconds down. Single leg, both legs, up to you. I'd kind of do single legs just to kind of give you a little break. So one leg goes up, comes down. Do that for 10 reps. So that's going to be at least, a minute and a half almost of doing moderately heavy weight too. So instead of super lightweight, it's actually moderately heavy. So it should be very challenging to get 5 reps with. In fact, you could do sets of 5 with it as well, but just do 10 seconds reps. So 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down, do 5 sets. That's 50-second set, right around a minute. Check that out, and you can Google it. I mean, it's look up patella tendonitis rehab workout, and I'm sure there's a referencing that study that talks about leg extensions helping it. So I have found that to be very helpful. In fact, sometimes during mobility day during our run cycle, I can feel like, my knee, when I do a squat, my knees are like a little tight. So I'll do a couple of super slow leg extension sets just to kind of help offset that. So there you go. All right. That was the last question. I appreciate it. If you guys got any more, email me, stu@stewsmith.com. I'll be back tomorrow. I appreciate you sticking around this long. If you have, go check out stewsmithfitness.com. Tons of stuff over there. Great books on special ops, military, law enforcement, firefighter. Yep, we're here to help you out. Thank you. You guys have a good one.